Right, so Israel built its war on the assumption that nobody inside Israel would ever hear the truth. The military censor screens the news before it airs, you see. The broadcast networks stay inside the security frame. The public receives the war through an approved script, and we thought our media was bad. Gaza is shown as a target map, not a place where people live. The ICJ ruling naming plausible genocide is not in the nightly bulletins. The UN reporting on starvation is not on the main channels. The collapse of hospitals and neighbourhoods is not presented as fact. The state needs the silence, and so information warfare is about to become the next battlefront. Iran is setting up a Hebrew language television channel, not for dialogue, not for diplomacy, but for entry. And Israel is losing its mind over it. Right, so Iran has approved the establishment of a Hebrew language television channel. The directive has come through the Supreme Council of the Cultural Revolution. They do have some very on-the-nose departmental titles over there, don't they? The council recorded the decision in its policy register. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian himself chaired the session. He's behind this move. Implementation sits with the Islamic Republic of Iran Broadcasting, though, the Iranian state broadcaster as that is. The purpose is to counter the propaganda of the Zionist regime in the media space. The announcement did not include a launch date for this, it has to be said. We're still in planning stages, but the network structure already exists for it. IRIB already broadcasts in English through Press TV, in Arabic through Al-Alam, in Spanish through Hispan TV. A Hebrew language station extends a standing broadcast architecture rather than creating a new one, so what they're planning here is quite feasible. They've already got the infrastructure to do it. The field it will enter is heavily controlled, though. Israel operates a military censor with legal authority to review all media publications. Israeli news organizations submit sensitive material to the censor before they publish anything. Haaretz has documented newsroom procedures in relation to this, where journalists describe clearance as standard workflow. The censorship is not symbolic, the directives are binding. Material can be blocked or amended before broadcast. The wider media environment is concentrated too. Reporters Without Borders ranks Israel 101st out of 180 in its Press Freedom Index. Ownership is clustered amongst political and commercial elites. Coverage aligns on national security framing. During wartime, that alignment intensifies. Dissent is marginal in the broadcast scale, therefore. The core narrative fields all remain broadly stable. The public is addressed within this structure, therefore. They don't get informed outside of it. And that inarguably plays a part in the narratives heard amongst the Israeli populace and what they will come to believe as a society. And this all occurs, of course, whilst the International Court of Justice has declared that Israel is plausibly committing genocide in Gaza. UN Special Rapporteur Francesca Albanese has submitted several reports now to the Human Rights Council describing the assault as genocidal in intent and pattern. The UN Special Rapporteur Michael Factory has stated that starvation is being used as a method of war. These findings are present in the international legal and human rights record and across international media to varying degrees. But they do not circulate with equivalent scale inside the Israeli broadcast field. Israel makes sure of it. Trust in government inside Israel still sits at low levels regardless of that, though. The Israel Democracy Institute records trust at around 20% now. The survey maps declining confidence across institutions. Secular and Haredi communities are polarised. Left and right aligned blocs remain divided. The pattern extends across multiple reporting cycles. War mobilisation occurs under conditions of declining civic trust. So now picture a Hebrew language Iranian broadcast entering this environment. It enters during a period of documented institutional distrust. It enters while the state narrative emphasises unity. It enters while the military censor maintains control over sensitive reporting. It enters whilst legal proceedings naming genocide continue in the international arena. Satellite broadcasting bypasses domestic licensing, though. Private dishes receive signals directly. Hezbollah's al-manar has broadcast into Israel via satellite this way. Israel attempted to obstruct Lebanese broadcasting during conflict. In fact, Lebanon accused Israel of jamming signals back in 2006. Obstruction occurred. Complete prevention of it did not, though. Online distribution bypasses broadcast control. Telegram channels circulate video without central oversight. Encrypted messaging distributes material peer-to-peer. URLs can be blocked. VPNs bypass blocks. Private circulation can persist, therefore. Fragments travel faster than official statements. The broadcast environment cannot be sealed off efficiently, less so now even than when Israel was doing it to Lebanon back in 2006. The fracture between external documentation and internal narrative remains wide open, therefore. And the genocide case very much continues. UN reports remain active. Civilian death continues. Displacement continues. Starvation conditions continue, all despite the supposed ceasefire in place right now. The internal broadcast narrative maintains national security framing, though, so this divergence still persists too. So this Iranian channel, assuming it launches in the none too distant future, will broadcast into this divergence, therefore. It will enter the language space where a lot of doubt is already present right now. It will not require majority adoption. It will require contact only, contact between external record and internal militarily censored speech. There's no restoration to a single narrative once competing accounts begin to circulate inside the primary language field. The division will only grow. The state's narrative infrastructure depends on coherence. Coherence requires control of the language through which events are understood. This is the purpose of the military censor. The military censor controls the flow of information to the public. The broadcast networks align within that security framing. The public receives the war through an authorized account only, therefore. The authorized account positions the actions in Gaza as necessary. Civilian destruction is minimized in presentation. Responsibility is assigned to the population under assault. The international record contradicts this presentation. The contradiction very much exists. We all know that. We're outside of this Israeli censorship. It's documented. It sits outside that domestic frame. Trust collapse alters the conditions of reception, though. When trust is already low, as it is in Israel, narrative coherence requires even greater enforcement. The enforcement remains formal, the enforcement remains legal, the enforcement remains cultural. But throw an Iranian Hebrew language news channel into that, and watch the sparks fly. Satellite access brings external accounts into the internal space. Internet circulation brings external accounts into private networks. The control structure cannot block all of that movement. It can slow it down, but it can't stop it. So the movement will continue. A Hebrew broadcast drops the translation barrier. It speaks in the language used at home. It speaks in the language used to justify the war. There's no distance in the words. There's no external frame to dismiss. The genocide case is live at the International Court of Justice. The provisional measures orders are binding. The reports documenting starvation are current. The destruction is recorded in satellite imagery and humanitarian assessments. The internal broadcast field presents the war as defence, so the contradiction will stand blatantly. The public is living through mobilization, therefore, right now, through economic pressure, through political division. The trust collapse is recorded in national data. The fracture is not a prediction, it is being measured. So this broadcast arrives while that fracture is active, therefore. So it doesn't generate the doubt. The doubt is already present. The broadcast does not need to convince. It only needs to be heard to turn that fracture into a gaping chasm. Iran has approved a Hebrew language television channel under state broadcasting. The purpose is written in the policy record: counter the propaganda of the Zionist regime in the media space. The structure for foreign language broadcasting already exists inside the IRIB. The channel merely adds Hebrew to English, Arabic and Spanish. Israeli media reported the move as an Iranian propaganda effort, because of course they could. There's certainly an argument to be had about that. We are talking about the Iranian state broadcaster here, after all. Israel's national news described the channel as an attempt to influence the Israeli public, but when they're censoring them to death like they are, it's only seeking to inform them more at the end of the day, isn't it? Surely. The framing treats the broadcast as a hostile information operation. The language of dismissal arrives before the broadcast even begins, before the channel even comes into being. The defence is preemptive and frankly, deeply hypocritical given the internal censorship Israel already implements. The military censor continues to screen Israeli reporting. The broadcast networks continue to follow the national security frame. Gaza is presented within that frame. The ICJ ruling naming plausible genocide is not presented within it, though. The UN findings on starvation are not presented within it. The public receives the war through that authorised and heavily sanitised presentation. So it's no wonder that trust in the government remains low. It's no wonder the Israeli Democracy Institute is recording declines in that. The division in the public remains. Mobilization continues inside that division. The fracture is not theoretical. It is documented in state-linked research. People in Israel do not trust what they're being fed by way of news. A Hebrew language broadcast arriving into that fracture, it won't arrive as foreign speech. It arrives in the language used to explain the war to the population when that information is being withheld from it by its own government. Iran have decided shenanigans are in order in this regard, and there are ways to ensure their Hebrew language content will get through. Israel may well whinge about it, but it only takes one video on a Telegram channel to go viral, and away we go. If they were more honest with their own people, though, this wouldn't be a problem for them, really, though, would it? As it happens, it's not just Israel Iran are getting one over on this week. Trump falls into that category too. Though you can argue in this case it was his own laziness that's opened the door for another Iranian win. That it does also come at Israel's expense along the way. So get all the details of that story here. Please do also hit like, share and subscribe if you haven't done so already, so as to ensure you don't miss out on all new daily content, as well as spreading the word and helping to support the channel at the same time, which is very much appreciated. Holding power to account for ordinary working class people, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next one. Cheers, folks.